Hi, this is Mr. West, and today we're doing a tutorial video on subtracting negative fractions. This, of course, is from Math-DrIlls.com. Make sure to check out Math-DrIlls.com. They have tons of great resources. There is a link in the description below. So before we get started, there's a couple things we need to cover. Number one, I would encourage you to check out the adding negative fractions video. But if you don't have time, I'm going to give you a quick crash course. Several things we need to know. Number one, we need to understand fractions. So the first thing about fractions is we just can't add the denominators like this. We can't go 1 plus 3 is 4 for the numerators, and then 2 plus 4 is 6 for the denominators. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. This clearly will add up to more than one circle, but yet, if we do it that way, we don't get that as an answer. We don't arrive at more than one complete whole. So it's not going to be the process. Plus, how do we get 2, which is halves, and add that to fourths, and get sixths? Like, how did the units get smaller? That does not make sense. So that is not the process. Instead, we need to find a common denominator, which I'll show you how to do in a second. The second thing we need to understand about this worksheet is when we're combining integers, if they have the same sign, so if there's a negative here and a negative here, it's going to become more negative. Think about, you start on negative 3, okay, it's negative 3, and you move more in the negative direction to get to a larger negative. You probably already understand that intuitively from 4 plus 2 equals 6, those two positives became bigger. It's when they're different that it's a little tricky. So 4 plus a negative 3 is going to be a positive 1. Notice how the 4 became smaller because the negative is like on the other team and it drags down the score of the positive. But the positive 1 because the positive was bigger. So that's why the answer is a positive 1. But in this case right here, we have 2 plus a negative 3. The negative is bigger this time, so the answer will be negative. And that's how it works. So same sign, whether it's positive or negative, you're going to add the numbers, and different sign, positives and negatives together, you're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. The last thing you need to know with subtracting integers is anytime you see this situation where we have two negatives right next to each other, that really means positive. So think of it this way, is you take away the negative. So minus is take away and then negative. So if you take away a negative, what do you have? You have a positive. So anytime you see those negative signs next to each other like that, think about that's going to be plus instead. And really, the last thing I want to say is if you see minus, it's really the same thing as adding a negative. So if you check out my adding a negative fraction video, you'll see that it's pretty much the same thing, okay? So those are just some a prelude to what we need to do right here. Let's start with the very first one. So this first one is actually going to be a little tricky because we're going to have to do some simplifying, but that's okay. I'm going to go kind of quick. So if you need a refresher on finding common denominator, I described that in more detail in other videos, but the main process is you can look up multiples of the denominator, for example, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and then you want to do it of the other denominator also, so 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, until you arrive at a common denominator, so something that both fractions can be made equivalent to, so 30 and 30. Why does that work? Well, we could have negative 1/5, negative 2/10, etc. Those are equivalent fractions. And the way to make equivalent fractions is multiplying the top and bottom by the same number. So what do we get? How do we get to 30 with 5? Well, we multiply it by 6. Okay, so I multiply 5 times 6, I get 30, negative 1, and again, I'm moving the negative up into the top here. I'm always considering denominators positive. So I have a negative 1/6 in the top. So negative 6 over 30 is the same thing as negative 1/5. It just looks different because now it has a common denominator that I can do something with the negative 4/6. Okay, now let's consider the other one now. What do I multiply 6 by to get to 30? Well, I multiply that by 5. So I get 30 there. And so I also have to multiply the top by 5, which is 20. So 4 times 5 is 20. So I have negative 6 over 30 minus 20 over 30. And now I can do this problem. So they have a common denominator. So I am just going to copy that denominator right down. There's no work required with that. I know my units are 30ths. And now I just have a problem in the top. My problem is negative 6 minus 20. Okay, I'm going to check. Do I have any two minuses next to each other? I don't. Okay, that's not two next to each other. If it was like this, that would be that situation, but we don't have that. Now, you're probably like, okay, I'm so confused here because it looks like I'm subtracting a positive. That's not what's going on here. Well, you shouldn't consider it that way, at least. I would call this a negative 6 and a negative 20. What happens when you combine a negative 6 and a negative 20? Well, they're the same sign. They're both negative, so they're going to become more negative. They're going to become negative 26. So minus 6 minus 20, negative 6 minus 20 is going to become negative 26. So that's our answer. Now, we can simplify it, though, by going in the reverse process of what we did to find a similar fraction, equivalent fraction. So instead of multiplying, I can divide to make it more simple. What common factor do they have between the two of them? Not 10, not 15. Anytime it's an even number, you can always divide by 2. So we're going to do that. We're going to divide by 2, and I get negative 13 because I keep that negative sign there. There's the negative sign. And divide that by 2, and I get 15. So negative 13 over 15 is my answer. That's the process start to finish. Now there's a couple wrinkles. So for example, this one, let's go ahead and go on to number 2. And that wrinkle is anytime you see this minus minus, okay, that's one of the situations I described right here, this exact thing. You need to change that to plus. What I tell my students to do is I just tell them make a big plus sign between those parentheses. So I have this big plus sign. Don't put any more negatives, though. I always see that. And don't do that. You should just really rewrite it. So I have negative 1/2 plus 1/3. So they're different signs. Okay? Now I need to find a common denominator between the two. Something that always works with finding a common denominator is multiplying those two numbers together. So I can multiply 2 times 3. That always works. Now, it might not be a guarantee that it's going to be the smallest denominator, which makes it easier, but it always works in terms of finding a common denominator. So I'm going to do 2 times 3, and I'm going to have 6 as my common denominator. Now, what did I multiply 2 by to get to 6? Well, I multiplied by 3. So I'm going to multiply by 3 there. So 2 times 3 is 6. Negative 1 times 3 equals negative 3. Is negative 3 over 6 equal to negative 1 over 2? Yes, it's both of those are half. And now I multiply by 3 times 2, and I have to multiply to the top and the bottom. So 1 times 2 is 2. I don't understand, one thing I don't understand is why that's minus, okay? I think it wants you to do minus minus like that, but I already changed it to plus, so make sure you change that to plus 2. Okay, so this is now a plus sign. So negative 3 over 6 plus 2 over 6. I know my answer is going to have 6 in the denominator, and now I just have this problem. Negative 3 plus 2 in the numerator. Negative 3 plus 2, well, the bigger number is negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And I'm going to do subtraction. 3 minus 2 is negative 1. So negative 1/6 is going to be my answer. Let's do maybe one more. We'll do this one right here. Let's see if any... Okay. Yep, we're going to do number 5. So we're going to end on number 5. First thing I'm going to do is change this to plus because it's a minus minus. So I'm going to change this one to plus 2. And now I need to find my common denominator. I know it's going to be 10. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 goes into 10. 2 goes into 10. There's no other smaller number. So I'm going to change this to 10. Okay. And now I just need to change the look of this fraction. I can't just change that to 10 and then keep this as negative 4. That's another common mistake I see. I have to be like, okay, well, how did I change 5 to 10? Multiply by 2. So I got to do that to the top and bottom, negative 8. What do I do to 2 to get to 10? Well, I multiply that by 5. Got to do that to the top. So 5/10. That's the same thing as a half. So now my problem is negative 8 over 10 plus 5 over 10. It's going to be negative because the negative is bigger than the positive. And I need to subtract 8 minus 5 is 3. Negative 3 over 10 is my final answer. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any comments on it, please leave, or if any of you have any questions, leave a comment below. Make sure to check out the description, and there's a couple links in there that will be useful. And I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Wes Explains Best.